What's happening, everybody? On today's show, we're going to hear from Texas head coach Steve Sarkisian as he spoke with the media yesterday at the Touchdown Club of Houston, addressing a number of topics as his program prepares to head into the SEC. Locked On SEC starts right now.
You are Locked On SEC, your daily podcast on the Southeastern Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, what's happening, everybody? Welcome into Locked On SEC. It's great to have you guys along on today's show. We'll hear from Steve Sarkisian as he spoke with the media yesterday, including a number of topics talking coming to the SEC, his team post-transfer portal, and a bunch of stuff. You will don't want to miss that. I'm Chris Gordy. Thanks for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Shout out to Everydayers. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. And this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. It's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. All right, we'll get to Steve Sarkisian in just a bit. But first off, I wanted to hit on this article that we saw up at ESPN where they ranked named the most impactful newcomers for all the teams in their preseason top 25. And this is the Mark Schlabach way too early list, but figure we hit on some of this because I think this is pretty vital when we talk about the teams this year. And some of them are transfers, some of them are incoming freshmen, but I think it's all guys that can play a pretty important role. So we'll run through some of these, at least the SEC schools they had ranked in their top 25. And we start with the Georgia Bulldogs as they put Trevor Etienne in here, the Florida transfer running back, as the top newcomer for the Bulldogs. They say Georgia's recipe for success under Kirby Smart has been a strong run game. And they lose Dejon Edwards, Kendall Milton, their top rushers from a year ago. Trevor Etienne comes in, very productive back the last 2 years over at Florida, behind at times what was a very average offensive line. He produced back-to-back seasons over 700 yards rather, scored 14 total touchdowns, and he's a playmaker. He should be very good behind that Georgia offensive line. And what they say is adding Etienne is similar when DeAndre Swift was in Georgia's backfield. He was a combination of sneaky power and contact balance, yet very nimble, and we should expect big things from Trevor Etienne. They do list Ohio State's top newcomer as former Alabama safety Caleb Downs, so figured we would get that mention in here because, look, it's a big loss for Alabama on their defense. Coming in at number 4, they have the Texas Longhorns and their top newcomer, Alabama transfer wide receiver Isaiah Bond. And here's what ESPN writes. They say this one's a toss-up with incoming wide receiver freshman Ryan Wingo, but Bond just has a little bit more experience. Texas will need to replace some key offensive weapons, particularly at wide receiver. And Isaiah Bond played in 13 games with modest production as a freshman for Alabama in 2022, but he broke out for 48 catches for 668 yards with 4 touchdowns as a sophomore. He's got great burst, runs a 10.48 in the 100 meters, super elusive, and his versatility and ability to stretch the field vertically will be key. With Quinn Ewers returning back at quarterback, they lose Xavier Worthy and A.D. Mitchell, but Isaiah Bond going to have a big chance to shine at wide receiver for the Texas Longhorns there. Coming in at number 6 on this list, they've got the Ole Miss Rebels and their top newcomer. It's defensive tackle Walter Nolen coming in from Texas A&M. Here's what they say. Nolen was highly sought after as the number 1 overall recruit in 2022. And then again, the college football transfer portal. During his time in College Station, he quietly made a significant impact while the program faced off-the-field turmoil. Nolen recorded 66 total tackles, 5 sacks across 2 seasons. The production just needs to become more consistent. He's got a speed and power combination to collapse the pocket, and his stout build at 6'4", 290 allows him to hold the point versus double teams. Look for Nolen to put it all together, playing for Pete Golding, who knows how to coach up good talent on the defensive side. See what Walter Nolen can do there for the Ole Miss Rebels on the defensive side of the ball. Coming in number 7, they got the Missouri Tigers and their top newcomer. It is the 5-star freshman defensive end Williams Nwaneri. 5-star is the 3rd highest signee at Missouri, 6'7", 260 pounds. He's got an 80-inch wingspan. And during his senior year in high school, he recorded 13 tackles for a loss, 6 sacks, 3 forced fumbles. He is difficult to contain with his quickness off the snap, and was a late bloomer in high school, but a tons of physical development there, and a lot of people think he can hit the field and immediately make an impact there. They lose defensive end Darius Robinson to the draft. Nwaneri did not enroll early and participate in spring ball, but the Tigers might have to rely on him to fill a void very quickly there. Williams Nwaneri, watch him at defensive end there for Missouri Tigers. Coming in number 9 on their list, they got the Alabama Crimson Tide, and their top newcomer, they got the true freshman wide receiver Ryan Williams, who's ready to step on campus and be an immediate impact player. As ESPN writes, Williams was the first 2-time Alabama Mr. Football in the award's 42-year history. He counted for an astounding 4,600 yards and 65 touchdowns in his final 2 years in high school football. Originally, he was a member of the 2025 class, reclassified to get into this class, and a prolific playmaker with excellent hands, top-end speed. Reportedly runs a 4.41 40-yard dash. And Alabama's receiver room is lacking that production. They lose Jermaine Burton to the NFL. Isaiah Bond transfers over to Texas. And Williams did not enroll early, but look, he's tall and lean, 6'1", and should be an immediate playmaker for Alabama. So watch the freshman wide receiver Ryan Williams there for the Tide. Coming in number 12, as top newcomer, ESPN puts wide receiver CJ Daniels, the transfer from Liberty. And as they write at ESPN, obviously they're going to lose Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas to the NFL draft. Garrett Nussmeier takes over for Jaden Daniels. And they're looking for go-to weapons. We know Kyron Lacey is there. We know Xavier Thomas transferred in from Mississippi State. But the Liberty wide receiver was very prolific last year. Caught 55 passes for over 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns for Liberty. And he doesn't have the same speed or explosiveness as a Malik Neighbors or a Brian Thomas, but his hands and pass catching skills are in the same category. So can they get him the football? We shall see. But CJ Daniels, wide receiver at LSU, coming over from Liberty, they think can be an impact player. Over at Oklahoma, they've got them at number 14. And their top newcomer, well, if you watch their spring game, you know who it is. It's wide receiver Deion Burks, the Purdue transfer. As ESPN writes, Burks is a key replacement at slot receiver following the departure of Drake Stoops. After a quiet start to his career, he emerged as a key player with Purdue, earned second-team All-Big Ten honors last year, caught 47 balls for 629 yards and 7 touchdowns. Not the biggest guy. He's only 5'11", 195 pounds, but shined in Oklahoma's spring game. Had 5 catches for 174 yards and 2 touchdowns. He's got that chemistry working already with quarterback Jackson Arnold. So Deion Burks, if you don't know him yet, get to know him. He should be the number 1 receiver for a deep and talented unit of wide receivers there at Oklahoma. Coming in at number 16, ESPN top newcomer. They've got the Tennessee Volunteers, and they've got true freshman wide receiver Mike Matthews. Of course, Tennessee returns its leading receiver from last year in Squirrel White. They bring back Brew McCoy off injury, Dante Thornton. But Matthews is simply that good. He's a 5-star prospect, 6'1", 190 pounds, has a wide catch radius, a 4.48 verified speed, and at slot position, going to be integral in Josh Heupel's offense. And Matthews has all the skills to shine there. So should he become an early favorite of Nico Iamaleava? We will see, but Matthews' versatility to play outside should garner him even more targets. And the sample size this spring has been very impressive. So watch Mike Matthews, the freshman wide receiver there at Tennessee. Getting near the bottom here at number 23, that got the Kentucky Wildcats. Their top newcomer this offseason is a Georgia transfer, linebacker Jamin Dumas-Johnson. They're going to have to replace Trevin Wallace, who went off to the NFL in the middle of that defense. But Dumas-Johnson is an all-SEC caliber, every down linebacker with great physical traits, can run sideline to sideline, can cover backs in coverage, can chase down quarterbacks. He can be a closing blitzer. He took over as a sophomore starter in 2022, recorded 70 tackles and 4 sacks, and his style play helped Georgia win a national championship that year, and he was a finalist for the Butkus Award. He missed 4 games with an arm injury last year as a junior, but transferred to Kentucky and could play multiple positions on that Kentucky defense. So Jamin Dumas-Johnson, definitely a guy to watch on the defensive side of the ball for Kentucky. And lastly, rounding out their top 25 over at ESPN, and the team coming in at number 25. It is the Texas A&M Aggies. And a guy we've talked about multiple times on this podcast, the newcomer Purdue transfer linebacker Nick Scorton. A&M loses a lot of their production on the defensive side of the ball, particularly pass rushers, and Scorton was undergraded as a 3-star recruit coming out in 2022. But he comes back home to Texas after a productive start to his college career at Purdue, led the Big Ten with 10 sacks as a sophomore last year, racking up 50 tackles, 15 tackles for a loss, forced fumble, and the Aggies can line him up at almost any spot they want on that front seven. He'll be a big-time contributor on that A&M defense. He's got the right guy game planning. That is Mike Elko. He will put him in the right spot. And there you have it. That is the ESPN article ranking some of the top newcomers in their top 25. We don't just the SEC teams on this list. But we mentioned Caleb Downs made this list, newcomer at Ohio State. They also list another former SEC guy on this list, Oklahoma State, with former Arkansas running back A.J. Green transferring in. So another guy to keep an eye on this upcoming season. All right, thank you guys for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Coming up next, you will hear from Texas head coach Steve Sarkisian and some thoughts as he heads into his first season as head coach of the Longhorns in the SEC. That's coming your way next. All right, first, game off. I got to pause here to talk about Monopoly Go, and there's so much good stuff happening in this game. We just got to tell you guys about it. Monopoly Go, you can team up with your friends for timed tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you're going to unlock. And there's so much to get. You get unique stickers. You can trade with your friends to complete albums for big prizes, cool new playing pieces to travel the boards with, hilarious emojis for taunting your friends when you smash their buildings or heist their vaults. And Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton include their new unique mini games like digging for treasure or the robot pachinko machine. There's always new timed events that help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go. So get off the bench today and go download it now for free in the Google Play or the App Store. It is game on with Monopoly Go. Download the app today and get started playing with your friends right now. All right, roll along here, Locked On SEC. Thank you guys for making us your first listen every day. Shout out to Everydayers. Tomorrow on the show, we'll have Chris Marler from the Fourth and Wrong podcast. He will join us to talk all things SEC. But first off, today we want to get into a little bit talking the Texas Longhorns as head coach Steve Sarkisian yesterday was hitting the road in Texas, heading to Houston for the Houston Touchdown Club, where he spoke to fans to get them excited and hyped up for the upcoming season. But prior to that, he met with the media, answering a number of questions. So our partner and friends at KHOU over there in Houston with the video passing along to us that they were able to get with some of the Q&A with Steve Sarkisian. Figure we would pass it along to you. So we'll bring that to you now. First off, Sark was asked about all the players he lost to graduation and to the draft this offseason. He was asked how to ensure that there's no drop-off from last year. Here was Steve Sarkisian.
Yeah, I was thinking about this, because it was hard to put my finger on it early on when I talked about, this team has a lot to prove. I really think there's a group of veteran players that have a lot to prove, and it dawned on me kind of watching the draft last weekend, but I think about Jake Majors, I think about Gunnar Helm, I think about Kelvin Banks, I think about Quinn Ewers, I think about Jaden Blue. On the defensive side, I think about Jahdae Barron, I think about Alford, I think about Barron Sorrell. So there's a nucleus of probably another 10 to 15 guys. If I literally went through every guy, I feel like they've got a lot to prove. And as much as it is, I feel like they have a lot to prove, maybe not so much to y'all or to the fans. I think they feel like they've got a lot to prove to that locker room, and they've got a lot to prove to those 11/13 guys who just left, that we're ready to step in and lead. And that's a good thing, right? That's a good thing. Anytime we have a chip on our shoulder at anything that we do, right, we're willing to go even further with that. And so I do think we've got great leadership in there. I think that we've recruited a really competitive team. I went back a couple of years ago, I talked about that signing class of how many guys were on championship caliber high school teams and competed for state championships and so on and so forth. Well, now that's in our locker room. So I think that there's a kind of the underswell in there is A, there's a lot to prove, but yet B, there's a lot of competitive players in there that want to be great, and they don't want to just be known as what last year's team did, but hopefully there's more out there for them to go do. So I feel like we're in a pretty good spot.
Next, Sark was asked, how big is it this summer to establish that leadership you need with a lot of guys back on this team? Sark was then asked, how did he personally grow as a coach since last season?
I don't know. We'll find out. I don't know. I always just try to stay. I think it's important for me, at least. I never want to go stale. I never want to just go, hey, we had a good season, rinse and repeat, and let's do the exact same thing all over again. Because every team takes on a different personality. There's different leaders. There's different personalities individually, which ultimately make up the team. So I try not to get stale. I'm analyzing our summer and how we're going to do our culture work. I'm analyzing schematically. Are we utilizing our personnel the right way? Are there new schemes out there? Can I go visit with people to find different things to make sure that our players are really engaged? And so I think that's, I don't know if I learned that about myself, but I do think that that's important for me, is that and not allowing our coaches to go that way. Now, we should not ever just change just to change, right? If we've got something good, let's make sure that we continue to try to enhance that. But again, I just don't want to live in this world of rinse, repeat. That was exactly what it needed to be. We're always trying to find better ways to do things to maximize the team that we have.
Next, Sark was asked about getting so many guys drafted into this year's NFL draft. Is that easier to get some of the newer guys to buy in to play their role on this team?
Well, it's something that we've been preaching. And fortunately, now I've got some stats to back it up. Right? Team success is what creates the foundation for individual accolades, honors, and awards. It doesn't work the other way around. And so now that I can give our players a 3-year study on 5-7, 0 draft picks, 8-5, 5 draft picks, 12-2, 11 draft picks. It's not a coincidence. The NFL likes to draft players off of winning teams, winning programs. Just look at the top 5 teams this past draft: Michigan, Texas, Alabama, Washington, and Florida State. And it was an anomaly this year for Georgia. They had 8 guys picked. They didn't have their normal 15 that they have. So my point is, right, I think our players are really understanding when you're part of a really good program, it's not always just about the stats. It's about how you can contribute to the team's success. And then if you can do that, the NFL is going to find those guys on those teams because they want to create that culture and they want to keep their culture of winning and whatever that looks like. And so I do think, yes, we've got some great things to point to now along the way, from specific players to our own growth as a program to just real stats from the NFL of what's happened in the draft. And so there's a lot to lean into there, but I think it is advantageous for us.
Yeah, then Sark was asked about how he handled the transfer portal this offseason. Obviously bringing in some guys, losing some guys. Here was Sark on the portal.
Yeah, I think that the portal's like you guys have heard me say, there's a lot of challenges to the portal. We recruit these high school kids for a year, year and a half, 2 years, sometimes almost 3 years, and we get to know them, their family, their coach, their aunt, their uncle. We know so much about them. When the portal comes, the challenging part is, how do you get to know them if you didn't have any prior relationship with them or where they're from? And so that's probably the biggest thing for us. We're not so hung up on what position a certain player plays or doesn't play. Do we think they can help us on the football field, and can they enhance our culture off the field? Again, we're at a point right now, we don't have to take a whole lot of risks. because we do have a deep roster. We've got a good football team. We've got a great culture. And oddly enough, when guys don't fit that, they kind of stand out, right? There's a competitiveness about our team that is real. There's a culture about our team that is real. And so you try to find those things in the recruitment process. Well, when you're just doing the transfer portal and you got 3 days, 5 days, 8 days to figure out if a kid's coming or not, there's a lot of work that goes into that. And so we're a little bit probably more cautious than most teams when it comes to that. But again, I think because of what we have is pretty sacred to us. I don't want to lose it, but I'm sure there'll be a guy or two here that we find out, figures out, kind of fits what we're doing, and then we'll see if they come or not.
And a big one here, Sark was asked how they are approaching the entry into the SEC this offseason. That's a big one.
It's kind of like a lot of the things that we've had to in our time. I think we definitely recognize it. We're excited about it. It's a great league, extremely competitive, really talented players, excellent coaches. Week in and week out, the challenges that it possesses. But at the end of the day, it's like, let's acknowledge it like we do, and then, okay, now what do we need to do, right? And what are we doing today to try to help ensure that we're putting our best foot forward when the opportunities present themselves? So it's exciting, that don't get me wrong, and I think that, from a university standpoint, from our athletic department standpoint, I feel like we're kind of on the forefront of that from a football perspective, especially being a fall sport where we're kind of one of the first ones to go compete. And so we want to make sure that we do our part, and we know it's going to be a heck of a challenge. It's a really, really good league, and the moment you think, you can take a break, the next team coming in is probably better than most people think. So you've got to be prepared for it, and you got to be prepared for the grind of the season in the SEC.
Sark, this never ending change to college athletics. A lot of people think that this next phase with House versus the NCAA is going to make dramatic changes. What are your thoughts on the potential for players to get even more money from the revenues? And as a follow-up, how do you keep up with all of this and the implications for your program?
Well, I just try to stay light on my feet, not trying to get stuck in one spot. No, I've said this all along, like, you have to be adaptable today in college football and in college athletics. We've had an immense amount of change over the last 3 years. And we're not done. And there's nothing wrong with change. Like I always say, change is inevitable. We're either getting better or we're going to get worse in anything that we do. And I really think as we come through on the other side of all this discussion of transfer portal, NIL, revenue sharing, whatever else you want to talk about, I think we're going to come out on a side where we're going to feel good about college football. I think the popularity of college football right now is at an all-time high. People love watching our sport. They're excited about it. People are excited about some of the conference realignment that's happening. People are excited about an expanded college football playoff. People are excited about rivalries getting renewed. Everyone's worried about conference realignment, that we're losing rivalries. Well, there's some good ones that are getting renewed too. And so I think in the end, when the dust all settles, whatever rules that they have in place for us, it's going to be important for myself, the University of Texas, our entire athletic department to remain adaptable, to stay on the cutting edge of what those rules are. And I think that we've done that here in a short period of time since NIL has been started. But as we gravitate towards, and if we get into revenue sharing and things of that nature, that's going to be vitally important as well. We've got some really smart people at UT, and I trust their judgment, and I trust that we're going to be in a good spot however this thing shakes out in the next 12 to 16 months, whatever that ends up being.
More from Steve Sarkisian here in just a second. More to come here on Locked On SEC, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. First, I want to remind you guys this episode presented to you by friends over at the GameTime app. GameTime is an authorized ticket marketplace of the NBA, which makes getting playoff tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the GameTime app actually go down the closer you get to tip-off, with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee. GameTime takes all the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. Last-minute deals, you can save up to 60% off buying last minute for sporting events. Flash deals. You could save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or event. You could save even more with zone deals when you choose a section and let GameTime choose the seats for you. Take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with GameTime. I love the all-in pricing option. You could toggle that feature to show the total upfront with no surprise fees at checkout. Download the GameTime app today. Create an account and use our code LOCKEDONCollege and get $20 off your first purchase. Again, terms apply. Create an account, redeem our code LOCKEDONCollege, get $20 off. Download GameTime today. It is last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, continue on here on Locked On SEC, and Texas head coach Steve Sarkisian hitting the road and talking to Longhorn fans across the state of Texas this week. And yesterday he stopped off in Houston, part of the Houston Touchdown Club, and our friends at KHOU were there grabbing the Q&A with Sark, talking with the media. So we figure we'd continue to bring you some of those sound clips. Next up, Sark was asked about Texas losing a couple of DBs to the transfer portal in recent weeks. And he was asked what his level of concern is this offseason for his secondary, particularly at defensive back.
Did it look that good in the spring and last year?
Didn't look that good according to who?
Well, I saw some of your cornerbacks get beat. So
Saw who?
I'm sorry?
I couldn't hear you.
I saw some of your cornerbacks get beat badly and some defense. Were you happy with them? I mean,
Saw Kelvin Banks get beat too. He's going to be all right.
yeah.
So we're going to be just fine. We're going to be just fine in the secondary. I think we've got a lot of versatility back there. Manny Muhammad going into year 2, I'm excited about him. Jalen Gilbo getting back into the fold from where he was in year 1 and probably a better version of him today. I'm excited about his versatility to go along with Jahdae Barron and his versatility, and Jahdae having the ability to play multiple positions, Jalen having the ability to play multiple positions. Love the addition of Andrew Makuba from Clemson. I love the growth of a Derek Williams, of where he's at from where he was. I love the position change for Jelani McDonald, having had his first spring at safety. I think he's got a bright future for us there. The veteran leadership of Michael Taft is big. I think Gavin Holmes, year 2 for him, is going to be big for him. And then we've got some puppies back that are learning how to play. And just like any other position, all right, those guys need to continually get developed. So to sit here and judge a high school kid who should still be going to his high school prom over how he got beat in the spring, I think would be rushing to judgment.
Sark was then asked about the expanded playoff this year and how he could be potentially coaching and his players playing the longest season they've ever played with those added playoff games. If they were to make a deep run and get to the championship game, it's going to be the longest season they've ever played.
Well, I think what's important is, we still have to prepare our team to play, right, on a lot of levels. But I also know how vitally important our depth is, and that we're going to have to play the bulk of our roster in those first 4 games. We have to expose our players to playing football. And you start thinking about 16 or 17 games, that's a long road. And that's a lot of potential injuries that could come across my desk. And so, point being, I don't want to wait till December or January to throw somebody in there who hadn't played all year. I've got to expose these guys. I think too, we're gonna look at some of our practice habits, especially in season once we get going. I don't want to say we're going to a total NFL model, but how do some of the best NFL teams practice, right, to keep their team fresh for that long? We're not going to get that break in December where you have a month to just get your injured guys back. I mean, you start playing, and as long as you keep winning, you have to keep playing. So we have to look at a lot of different things there, and that research is kind of already underway. We've got a great sports science department that supplies me with a ton of information, but we need to really look at this thing the right way to make sure that we're at our best when our best is needed, December, January, to put ourselves in position.
Sark was then asked about freshman wide receiver Ryan Wingo, who had a big spring, and if any other freshmen stood out to him throughout the spring period, but particularly Wingo.
Yeah, I thought Ryan had a really good spring. You know, I think I'd referenced him a couple different times as things got brought up of just, you know, he moves older. You know, he's just stronger, he's faster that way than most kids when they come in. There's a real humbleness about him that I appreciate. You know, he just comes to work, he works hard. He tries to improve, he tries to work on the things that you ask of him to do, but he has a skill set that is definitely unique. And so I'm pleased with kind of 15 practices into him of his college career of kind of where he's at, but there's still a ton of work to do for him. You know, I like the two young running backs. I thought they provide a lot. I love what Jordan Washington brought as a freshman. You know, should still be in high school. I like what Trey Owens brought for a kid who should still be in high school. You know, defensively, all those guys on the defensive side of the ball all kind of took turns where they flashed for me. You know, whether it was an Alex January, a Colin Simmons showed some things, a Zena, a Jordan Johnson-Rubel, Kobe Black, you know, so we see a lot of the flashes from them. For young players, one of their biggest challenges is finding a level of consistency, right, to where they can perform to the best of their ability at a level field. I'd much rather that than the flash plays up and the not so good plays down. If we can find that with them, they have a better chance to contributing for us.
Finally, Sark was asked about his continuing to call plays in game and if that keeps things fresh for him and continuing to do that in game as a head coach.
I don't know. I think that's part of it. I enjoy our game. Like I said, I love college football. I love football in general. I love the kind of art of our game, you know, and the art of building a team, the art of strategically trying to game plan somebody, the art of calling plays in the midst of, you know, the psychological warfare with the other play caller on the other side of the ball. So there's a lot, I think, that goes into it. And you know, I always wonder, like, when you get hired, I got hired as the offensive coordinator from Alabama, and we were pretty good. And I would hate to think that I would take away the thing that I probably did best, right? Because that was part of the reason I got the job, right? And so, but I've got a great group around me. Our offensive staff is really, really good. Coach Flood, Coach Milwee, Coach Choice, Coach Jackson, Coach Banks. I mean, these guys are some of the best at what they do in all of football. And so we do a lot of collaborative work and even on game day with the stuff that we're calling. So I'm fortunate to have that group around me, but I'm in no rush to give it up, that's for sure.
Thanks, Coach.
All right, y'all. Thank you.
That against Steve Sarkisian, Texas head coach, down in Houston yesterday at the Houston Touchdown Club, and our friends at KHOU helping us grab some of that video and pass it along to you. Appreciate them. Hey, before we get out of here today, quick hoops nugget. Kentucky, very busy in the transfer portal as Mark Pope continues to assemble a whole new roster. The Wildcats have been very busy. They landed Dayton transfer Kobe Bray, a standout three-point shooter. And then Kentucky landed another portal player yesterday. West Virginia guard Kerr Kriisa pledged to the Wildcats and heading to Lexington. And Kriisa has been on Pope's radar for a couple years. This is the third time he's pursuing him. Jonathan Givony of ESPN noted that Pope recruited Kriisa out of high school. And again, when he transferred out of Arizona, he is a three-point shooter. That's one of his strengths. And 3 seasons at Arizona, he shot 35% from three and shot 6.6 three-pointers per game, making 2.3 of those. So Kentucky in recent days, they've added Lamont Butler from San Diego State. Like we said, Kobe Bray from Dayton, forward Andrew Carr from Wake Forest, forward Otega Owe from Oklahoma, Drexel center Amari Williams, and Oklahoma State center Brandon Garrison. If you're heading to Big Blue Madness in a couple of weeks, you are going to need a program and a roster to get to know all your new players. That is going to do it for this edition of Locked On SEC. Again, join us tomorrow. Chris Marler will join us. We'll talk all things SEC with him. And thank you guys for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Come on back tomorrow. Hey, for your second listen, check out Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. And it's also available on the Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with our local experts at Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now, available in the free Fire TV channels app. I'm Chris Gordy. This has been Locked On SEC. We will talk to you guys tomorrow.